Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating psychological case study wrapped inside a 19th century Spanish short story called La Buenaventura by Pedro Antonio de Alarcón. You can basically think of this as a David versus Goliath story, but what makes it so incredibly compelling is that the battlefield isn't a physical one. It takes place entirely within the human mind. Okay, let's dive right into this because the central mystery we're investigating today is just that. Can a single sentence defeat an invincible outlaw? We're going to see exactly how a socially marginalized fortune teller managed to completely dismantle a legendary, heavily armed bandit using absolutely nothing but words. Section 1. A Clash in Andalusia, setting that 19th century context.
To really grasp the incredibly high stakes of this encounter, we have to drop ourselves into 19th century Spanish society. This was a world heavily shaped by deep-rooted traditions, driven by strict codes of honor and religion, and totally governed by social class and prejudice. You mix in a heavy dose of superstition, widespread violence, political instability, and a continent being completely transformed by the Napoleonic Wars, and, well, you get the picture. It was a harsh, unforgiving reality where brute physical force almost always dictated who survived and who didn't.
Section 2. Heredia's strategy, or using intelligence for survival. So, in a world ruled by muscle and guns, our protagonist, Heredia, has to rely entirely on keen observation. He's a marginalized gitano, a gypsy, who makes his living reading fortunes. Because he doesn't have physical power or social standing, he depends on a razor-sharp intellect to survive. He's actually a brilliant, textbook example of a concept you might know, Carl Jung's trickster archetype. That's the classic figure who outsmarts opponents not by overpowering them, but through flexibility, quick improvisation, and just profound psychological insight. Heredia is the ultimate trickster. He proves that genuine, undeniable power can stem simply from being able to read and manipulate human behavior. We really see this when Heredia is suddenly captured by a feared outlaw and faces almost certain death. He doesn't panic. Instead, he taps into what psychiatrist Viktor Frankl later defined as emotional regulation. That's the psychological principle that we always retain the freedom to choose our attitude, no matter how extreme or oppressive the external circumstances get. Just like Frankl observed centuries later, Heredia's true bravery isn't about throwing punches. It lies in his incredible emotional self-control. He flat out refuses to let panic dictate his thinking when he's literally staring down an execution. Section 3. Patron's collapse and the psychology of fear. Now, what's really fascinating here is contrasting Heredia with his captor, Perón. Perón is this legendary outlaw, a guy whose absolute invincibility is built entirely on a foundation of terror. Notice how totally opposite their strategies for handling uncertainty are. Heredia's power comes from intelligence and insight. His weapon is language, and his leadership style relies on persuasion and adaptation. Perón, on the other hand, gets his powers strictly from violence and physical intimidation. His weapons are literal guns and a terrifying reputation, and his leadership style is just pure fear and domination. One of them accepts and exploits uncertainty, the other desperately tries to eliminate it with force. If we map this showdown out on Freytag's pyramid, the psychological climax is absolutely brilliant. Right at the peak, Perón demands that his fortune be told. Now, Heredia knows that giving him a good fortune just delays his own murder, so he risks his life to boldly predict Perón's imminent capture and execution. By doing that, he secretly plants this inescapable psychological trap right inside the outlaw's mind. And this is where it all unravels. It's so crucial to see how this one single prediction completely destroys the outlaw. Let's walk step by step through Perón's mental collapse. He starts off at step 1 with total confidence. No one can defeat me. But then step 2, the doubt creeps in. Wait, what if he is right? That quickly spirals into step 3, anxiety, where suddenly every little event could be fulfilling the prophecy. Then comes step 4, obsession. I have to escape my fate. And finally, step 5, total resignation. The prediction has come true. This sequence is a perfect illustration of Daniel Kahneman's modern theory of cognitive bias, where a single unproven threat just completely consumes the mind. The idea takes root, and Perón essentially does the work of destroying himself from the inside out. Section 4. Destiny and Control, and the Incredible Power of Narrative. This whole tension between supernatural destiny and our own cognitive biases brings up philosopher Paul Ricoeur's concept of narrative identity.
It's the idea that we understand who we are by constructing stories that organize our past, present, and future into a meaningful whole. When you look at the story through that lens, you realize Heredia didn't just predict the future. He pulled off an absolute masterclass in narrative intervention. He forced Pardron to inhabit a terrifying new story about his own identity, instantly transforming him from an invincible king of the mountains into a doomed, paranoid fugitive.
And that bridges perfectly into Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism. Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free, meaning we continually define ourselves through our choices, not through predetermined destinies. What's amazing here is that Alarcón wrote this story decades before existentialism was even formalized as a philosophy. He's showing us that while fear heavily influenced Perón, it didn't strip away his free will. Perón remained completely responsible for those paranoid, obsessive choices that ultimately led to his downfall. He chose to believe the narrative.
Section 5. Enduring Belief and How Words Become Action. So, what does this all mean for us today? Well, consider this really powerful quote from the source material. Language can become a form of action. Words do not merely describe reality. Under particular circumstances, they participate in creating it. The absolute crucial takeaway for you here is that beliefs have immense, tangible consequences. It honestly doesn't matter if those beliefs are objectively true or if they're just labels, like successful, failure, or gifted, that we passively accept from society, the media, or our peers. Once we accept a label, it shapes our reality. It drives our actions. Which leaves us with this final, pretty provocative thought. Are we prisoners of the narratives we believe? Heredia won because he deeply understood the power of a story, and Padrón lost because he let someone else write his. I want to encourage you to take a hard look at the stories, the predictions, and the labels that you let govern your own life. Are they actually serving you, or are they just a self-fulfilling prophecy keeping you trapped? Thanks for joining me for this explainer today, and remember, keep questioning the narrative.